Hi, everybody, and welcome to Friday Night Flock Talk. I'm Robin Sullivan of the Leather Elves. Thank you for joining us this evening. I have a couple of reminders, just the usual housekeeping stuff. You can like the Leather Elves on Facebook. That way you get notifications when we go live, or you should, depending on what Facebook's doing that day. And you can check the Leather Elves Facebook page to catch surprise sales, pop-up events. We just had a sale, and thank you for everyone who ordered. The elves are going to be pretty busy between now and the holidays. You can follow the Leather Elves on Instagram. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. All of those options will help you get more information from the Leather Elves and the things that we're working on. So, tonight, I have the pleasure of having a guest who has spent a lot of time in the veterinary world. My guest tonight is Dr. Stephen Fronefield. Hello.
Hey, I'm here.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I would be doing better if I was in Houston doing this in person so that I could be warmer.
That
But
would be fun. Next
we
time.
should, we'll make it happen. So I need to read your bio. And I forgot my glasses, so I'm going to do one of these.
I just make
Um,
something up. It'll be fine.
oh, really? That would be fun.
Sure. Sure.
Okay. Dr. Fronefield graduated from Auburn University's College of Veterinary Medicine in 1986. He also received a Bachelor's of Science degree in chemistry while attending Auburn University. You're an overachiever. He opened ABC Animal and Bird Clinic in Sugar Land, Texas in 1995 and moved into his beautiful new facility in 2000. Dr. Fronefield became a diplomat of the American Board of Veterinary Practitioners, specializing in avian practice in 1998. He is one of only 7 veterinarians in the state of Texas that hold this avian specialization certification. He has a special interest in imaging techniques for diagnostic evaluation of his patients. This includes digital radiography, ultrasound, and endoscopy. He and his wife have 2 sons. One is enrolled at Texas A&M College of Veterinary Medicine. Is he finished yet?
No, he's got one more year and a half.
One. All right. And one is an active paramedic. Dr. Fronfield's pet population is down to 1 freshwater aquarium. Wow, that's impressive. And he
I
continues
know.
to live vicariously through his clients. He enjoys fishing in the aquarium,
Well, it used to be. They're all gone.
camping, and weekend ranching. All right. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Um, so that's pretty impressive. Um, and the fact that you are one of 7 in Texas, um, I get the question all the time. Where's how do I find an avian vet? Where can I find an avian vet? And I don't have a lot of good answers.
Yeah, so probably the so there's a group of specialists which I joined or became member of in '98. But there's a larger group of veterinarians that have an interest in avian medicine. And so
Mhm.
if you're, there's not a lot of specialists throughout the country. So I think there's somewhere in the range of between 50 and 60 total specialists in the country. So if you can find one of those, at least you know the skill set they have or the training they have. But if you're the rest of the country that doesn't have a specialist nearby, the Association of Avian Veterinarians, the AAV, has a find a vet on their website. And so you pull them up, you go to find a vet, you put your zip code or your city and state, and it'll pull up veterinarians in your area that have enough interest in avian medicine to be members of that group, which is
Okay.
actually pretty good. I talked to someone today who was looking for someone in Iowa that would see her button quail. And so she said she talked to veterinarians in Iowa and she calls me. I'm like, well, I'm in Texas. Probably can't help you, but gave her the AV website and she could find there's 5 or 6 not too far from her in Iowa that had
Right.
an interest in birds, right? They may
Right.
not have been bobwhite quail specialists, but or button quail, excuse me, but they could help her.
I remember, but I had a Kaik, a black cap Kaik, and I took him for a wellness visit. It was his first time. I had just gotten him. I didn't have an avian vet at the time, and I, looked up, and the woman had it. It said avian in her title, on her website or in her telephone book listing. Let's show you how old that
Yes,
is.
I
Yellow
remember those
page.
days.
And she said, so I brought the bird in, and I had worked on some cooperative care with this bird. And she, was okay, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And I want to do a wing check. Okay. And I turned to get something out of my purse, and I turned back. And well, first of all, before I turned all the way back, I heard that Kaik scream of death.
Yeah,
The one I do.
I
And
guess, as a matter of
I
fact.
looked, and she had completely toweled him and had him, like this. And I was like,
Gosh.
what are we doing? And she said, well, I need to get some blood. And I said, well, is it, routine, or is there something that you saw that you're uncomfortable with? And she said, no. She said, it's just routine. I want to get a baseline. I said, well, then would you be okay if I did some cooperative care? So maybe part of that could be voluntary. And she laughed and she said, you can't do a voluntary blood draw and on a bird. And I said, you can. It's a lot of work, but
Hmm.
you can.
Right.
And I said, so at that point, I kind of went, I'm not so sure. And I said, so I'm speaking at AAV. Are you going? And she said, oh, no, I need more work on small mammals. And I went, God help the small mammals. So anyway, it's tough
You
to find
know,
somebody.
yeah, an interest and a proficiency sometimes are two different things, right? And in
Absolutely.
fairness, a lot of clients help teach veterinarians who don't see a lot of birds. They can help. These are the ones that are experienced aviculturists or
Mhm.
experienced bird owners can help veterinarians get better,
Yeah.
right? So it's not
Yeah.
like there literally are people that are really trying but just don't have experience.
So, do you think I mean, and this is an off the cuff question, but do you think that veterinarians are, are birds intimidating? Are they intimidating? And the reason I ask is zookeepers, when I was working with a lot of zookeepers, they were working lions and, big cats and large hoof stock. And they'd bring, a hornbill into their section, and they'd be losing their mind. I don't know what to do
Right,
with that thing. I
right,
mean, is it the
right.
same?
So it is, and a lot of it is because they're so different, right? They're nothing like mammals. And the other
Right.
problem is when they finally have to be handled, the perception is that birds are fragile because when they
Mhm.
come in, usually they're so sick, we don't have much time to work. But these guys are actually birds are actually very durable and they're actually pretty tough. The problem is that when we see them, they're at the tail end of how they can look normal. So it is
Mhm.
very intimidating. So there are a lot of veterinarians that will dabble in small mammals or reptiles,
Mhm.
for example. But dabbling in birds, there's not enough time on medical and surgical issues to dabble. You can't say, well, let me send it home for a day and see how it does on X, Y, or Z. You really got to move on those guys. But gosh,
Mhm.
they live they live through such significant pathology that it amazes you sometimes that they survive long enough to come into the clinic. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
And the fact that because they're a prey species, they mask so much of that, and until it's almost too late.
Yeah. Mask or get eaten, right? In the wild,
Right.
mask or
Right.
get eaten.
And
Yeah.
I think that's something for pet owners. One of the things is to really know their bird's body language, so that
Right.
when things do start to go south, they might be able to see it.
Yeah. Pick it up early.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing is those guys, birds as flock animals in the flock, they only have a small segment they have to keep for security. If you take that same
Mhm.
flock animal and put them alone in a cage, now it's stressful because they're in charge of 365, 360 degrees around them for
Yeah.
security purposes. They don't have that shared
Mhm.
security. So it's a little bit of a stressor not to have your flock around. So
Right.
that's a part of their challenges.
It makes sense. So tell us a little bit, if you would, about ABC Animal and Bird Clinic.
So it started out, I worked for one of the guys that actually founded AAV back when the earth was cooling. So I worked for him for a little bit and mentored with someone else. And then I moved to another clinic and worked for, I was probably out 7 years before I moved out and purchased a little, like a strip center satellite clinic that someone owned. And so I go in there, and its name was not one I wanted to keep. And so I was going to make it Animal and Bird Clinic. So I wanted bird in there because at that point, I wasn't board certified yet, but I was working on a lot of birds. So I had Animal and Bird Clinic. And so the first letter, animal is A, bird is B, C is clinic. So actually my dad created the little logo that was ABC. And so all my clients, when they were talking, back in the day when checks were written, it was called, they would say, oh, this is ABC, Animal and Bird Clinic. So that's how it got its name. But I was solo. It was when I started the practice, I had a morning technician, receptionist, kennel person, which is all one person, and an afternoon kennel receptionist, technician person. So it was me and two people. And so I would come in, we would take care of the critters, and then we'd have a shift midday, and then the rest of the day. So it went from that. In '95, I built, it's funny with that bio, built our new clinic in 2000. I said, well, that's probably not so new now. It still looks new. It feels new to me, but it's about as old as a lot of the students are now, are older. And so I went from 1,100 square feet to 5,600 square feet, and we got some more veterinarians in, which has been spectacular. So the clinic, all my associates work on birds. Otherwise, they can't work there, right? Because although we see dogs and cats and reptiles and rodents, they got to be able to do birds because we see so many of them, and they're so much fun. Why would you not?
Well, people are so lucky that live, within driving to, with, I would say 2 hours. That would be driving distance for that would be fine. Because it's not, we were talking, about that earlier, and how it's just, it's the vets aren't there. I was looking, I happened to be on a website that had animal jobs, and I can't tell you the number of just veterinarians in the state of Maine that they were looking for. Vet techs, veterinarians, and it's a tough process. So what we're gonna bet, well, we're gonna go in the Wayback Machine, not that way back, but so how did little Stephen decide he wanted to be a veterinarian, or did he decide at a young age?
He did. So growing up, I grew up in North Alabama, where there's the foothills of the Smokies. And so growing up, my pets were what I could catch. So I could keep them for a month, and I had to release them. So for me, it was wildlife stuff and reptiles. I caught mostly reptiles. And then my 8th grade year, I read a book called James Herriot books, All Creatures Great and Small. And that was the first time I'd even thought about veterinarians. I just got a dog that summer as well. And so when I read the book, I said, that's what I want to do. And so so from 8th grade on, that was my direction. And I kind of went from I'm going to be a veterinarian to, as I got closer, I thought I was going to do reptiles, because they don't die as fast as birds do. It's like they give you a little bit more time. But then as I got into vet school and I worked with raptors, the birds were more fun. And then in order to survive, you do have to have some sort of income. And at the time, the people who owned reptiles were 18-year-old male with no money, and that would not support any kind of living. So that's kind of how that was the morph, right? And then I went to vet school. I worked at the Southeast Raptor Rehab Program. So each day I would get up and work with a raptor for the 4 years I was at vet school. So that was super fun.
Oh,
so I didn't know.
We learned something every day. I didn't know that you had worked raptors before. That's
Yeah, I didn't have a clue about parrots when I got out of vet school. We saw 2 parrots when I was in school, and the rest we had 2 weeks of parakeet, medicine. But it was raptor stuff. I had no idea how to handle a parrot when I came out.
Well, and it's just like a chat, a paragraph in the vet textbook, right? The avian.
Yeah.
And it's like,
at the time, yeah. It was a little whiff of smoke.
It's, the with raptors, it's so different. And I used to teach a raptor handling class, and we would get a lot of parrot people that came, and we would allow, we'd work with them. We'd do the book stuff, and we teach them how to
Right.
tie a falconry knot, blah, blah, blah. And then that afternoon, they got to handle a raptor. And I could always tell who was a raptor and who was a
Oh
parrot
no.
person. On the glove, the raptor people were, staying away from the feet. They were making sure their hands were away from the feet.
Right.
The parrot people were all worried about the beak. And
Yeah,
I
the
said,
beak. Yeah,
not the end you need to worry about on these birds. It's really
yeah.
not.
I, Robin, I'm going to mute you
So,
for 1 second. I have some background noise that's kicking in. I'm going to mute you for 1 second and run, cut this background noise off, and I'll be right back.
all
It'll be
right,
brief.
I'll fill.
Perfect.
So, one of the things, like as Dr. Fronefield was saying, there's so much to birds. There's so much, and they're just fascinating to work with. And you can put that back up, Nick. I'll get there. Um, the one of the place where I met um, uh, the good doctor, was at Parrot Festival. Parrot Festival is the last full weekend in January every year. It's in Houston, and it is absolutely worth the trip. So, just look at that. We used the time for a plug.
I
It's a
know.
great event.
And
Um,
I'll be speaking there. How convenient is that?
and so will I.
I know. Incredible. And so, yeah, it's great. It's actually super fun.
And we'll probably end up on a panel at the end. That's how that
You
goes.
think? You think?
But so all right, so avian and exotic was the way you went. And just let's really quickly, what does that learning path look like?
So it's when I was in vet school, there was not much of a path for avian and exotics. And so a lot of what I did as far as doing exotics was done postgraduate. So I went to a clinic that saw a lot of exotics, and I went to a lot of AAV seminars, a lot of continuing education. So fast forward from cooling of the earth to the 2000s, a lot of the vet schools now have more formal training, which is nice. They give you a lot more information. Of course, we know a lot more about parrots than we used to. So my path was the board certification is 6 years of private practice with a certain amount of seeing birds, because that's my
Mhm.
specialty, and then case reports, and then a test if you qualify. Now you can
Okay.
either do the practice route, or you can do a residency. When I graduated, there was one residency in the country that did exotics. So the availability it boomed in kind of the early 2000s and 1990s, and then it's shrunk up a little bit, but it ran all the way through probably the 2015, maybe a decade ago. It was still pretty good. A lot of the vet schools had specific tracks for doing either avian or exotic, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, that is cool. And then like you said, you worked for a veterinarian, then you opened your own clinic, and then you got other veterinarians to work with you.
I do.
Um, that's nice. So Lori McFarland asked, did you take ornithology classes?
I didn't have ornithology specifically. One of my clients who took ornithology in Colorado would tell me about it, and then she gave me all of her notes. But have I been through them all? No. Do I think ornithology is super interesting? I do, but I have not done those classes.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting, and when you talk to different avian specialists, what their focus is, what their in your bio it says, you're interested in digital
Imaging.
radiography,
Mhm.
imaging.
Right.
So how did that come about?
So when I was at vet school, I would work between, we had quarters when I was at Auburn. So between quarters, I would work in the radiology department. And so I got an interest there. It probably helps that my black and white skills are much better than my color ones. I'm red green colorblind, so I don't have great red green colorblind. I have other colors I can see, But I think, and we were talking, another friend of mine is a veterinarian, maybe I have better skills in radiology because I see black and white or grays very well. So, but love radiology, right? So CTs are going to become more common, but ultrasound, same thing, black and white with a little bit of color on color flows. But that's kind of how that happened. I did a lot in vet school. I got, the more you do, the better you get, the more you like it, the more you like it, the more you do. That's how that works. And that's actually how I got in avian medicine, kind of the same way. I did it, I learned it, I liked it, I did well at it, and kept on going. That's kind of how that worked.
That's
But
really
super fun.
interesting. And yeah, that it makes sense. The colorblind issue, and especially red green.
Yes, I
Um,
know. That's so unfair. That's okay.
yeah,
I got great staff.
well, I got to tell you, I may overshare here, but my ex-husband, who's a pilot, was red green colorblind.
Really? And he was a
And
pilot.
yep. And so that there were extra measures that needed to be taken. He was wonderful, is wonderfully successful at it, but yeah. And so there's ways around that. So even with that as a challenge, you were successful and found kind of
Yeah.
your niche and what you like to do. So Lori also asked, in your opinion, what would be a great class or classes for a student in vet wait in vet medicine for if somebody wanted to have an avian specialty, what would you say to them? I'll translate for Lori.
Is this a vet student or a vet tech?
Oh, we'll have to wait and see what her answer is there.
So,
Um,
it depends a little bit, right? So, if you want to be an aviculturist, then you go to AFA. If you're interested in vet tech or actually veterinarian, AAV has a technician group as well that teaches
okay.
avian stuff, which is really good. So it got better funding this year. So AAV is funding the technician group, which is great. And then
Wow.
for veterinarians, AAV to get your training and ABVP.
Mhm. Okay, so it's a vet student.
So a vet student, if you're in the United States, every vet school has an AAV chapter. And
Mhm.
so you should be able to find your AAV chapter. It's a free membership for the students. And in that AAV group, the website has all the references from the conferences and the journals, but you also have access to the Golden Egg, which is a kind of a research, almost like it's almost like a Google for bird stuff only, right?
Mhm.
And so you can go there and get information. But for vet students, your CE is going to be AAV's annual conference and ABVP's annual conference because there's hands-on. And for vet students, they will give you funds if you help in the labs. AAV has fund for vet students, and Harrison Bird Diet has scholarships for students, all to get them to AAV conference and ABVP.
Nice.
So there's
And then
some
Nick
there's some great there's some funds. Go
Nick
ahead.
asked if you can attend AAV's annual conference as a pet owner.
You cannot. You
You
cannot. Those are
cannot.
veterinarians only. Um, the technicians are obviously not veterinarians, but there's a technician track. And
Okay.
then AFA, so there's so AFA, which is American Federation of Aviculturists, has also great lectures. And so both pet owners and aviculturists and pet enthusiasts can go to AFA and get all
Mhm.
sorts of good information. So it depends on if
Right.
you're looking medical or if you're looking, husbandry and maintenance and those things, which is critical on the veterinary side as well. Husbandry is super important. Behavior at AFA, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, good stuff.
AAV did at one going back to, oh, it's quite a while ago. They did a behavior day,
Hmm.
where they had us come in and speak on behavior and enrichment. And that was kind of fun because it's a different perspective. Like for me as a speaker in behavior, it's a different perspective um, to hear from veterinarians and versus aviculturists. So
Right.
it's kind of neat. So we've had some questions, and I want to go back to them if we can. Um, so Ryan asked, let's see. Well, first Chuck asked, Okay, I have to go wait. Oh wait, Brian asked, do you do surgical sexing?
Actually, I hardly ever do surgical sexing anymore. The advantage, of course, of surgical sexing is you can look at the gonads, either testicle or ovary, and you can evaluate what the maturity is and the health. But for truly identifying the gender, I do DNA sexing. So it's DNA sexing is risk free, and surgical sexing, although a low risk, it's not risk free. I like risk free,
Yeah,
right? Unless I have to
yeah.
get in for some reason.
hmm and then Douglas was asking what your feelings are about testing. They test twice for Borna just to be safe.
Hmm. So,
Um,
Bornavirus is its own special little troublemaker, right? And actually, the protocol in there's a protocol in Germany that's set up to try to maximize the probability that your bird is negative, and they're doing a PCR and a serology at 6 week intervals for three cycles, all negative, and they'll call that a negative bird. So in the states, Schubot Lab at Texas A&M will do serology, and then PCRs are done through some of our other labs. And the key to testing is really make sure you get good samples. If it's blood samples, be sure you're not getting it off a toenail. Make sure you're getting good samples, because contamination is a reason you sometimes get inaccurate results. But
okay.
that is a wide open question. The avian bornavirus, there's a lot of things happening still in that with that disease and with that organism.
We are, I think we're going to have Dr. Dahlhausen on to talk about.
Nice, nice.
So there's so much going on there. It is such a big discussion,
It is,
and it's
and he'll talk
very
about
important.
Yep, he'll talk about ganglioneurosis, right? Or
Yeah,
the anti-ganglioside antibody is what he's going to talk about as well, which is
yeah,
not it's not specific for avian border but it is more specific for inflammation of the gangliosides. So
yeah,
it's interesting, and it's changing.
yeah. And I think so. Along to kind of piggyback on Douglas's question, if I'm a pet owner, what do I want to test for in a new bird that's new to me?
So a little bit depends on if you're bringing it into an existing flock or if you're bringing
Mhm.
in your first new bird, right?
Okay.
So if it's a solo bird, your risk of transmitting to obviously other birds is zero. So when you get a new bird and you're already a bird owner, my primary stuff when they come in, obviously if it's a new bird in a household of birds, is have a place to quarantine, right? Quarantine for 30 to 45 days. It has a separate air return or separate hair source. And then I'll do an exam. Exam's always your first thing, exam and weight. And then I'll do a CBC, which is a complete blood count. I always do profiles. If I don't say always, it's the owner and I discuss it, right? I prefer to
Mhm.
do chlamydia tests or psittacosis because it's contagious, right, between people and birds. So I do that one. I don't typically do films on the first time through, but then we do a stool sample. And although we don't see intestinal parasites very often, we see them
Mhm.
occasionally. So I do check for intestinal parasites, and then I'll check for normal versus abnormal bacteria. You can see here, like beak and feather disease, some species, especially right now, we're seeing an uptick in that. Some
Yeah.
species I'm going to check for beak and feather. But Checo's disease, we're not seeing that much of that, so I don't typically run that one. Chlamydia, I try to run that one every time. Really, it's for human health,
Right.
right? So I want the bird to be healthy, but I don't want people to get sick. And then PDD.
Mhm.
So the question
Okay.
is always, if a PDD comes back positive, what's that conversation look like? Because
Mhm.
now, if it's positive, does that mean it's a death sentence, or does that mean it's not? And it's similar to HIV. And a PDD positive, they can be positive their entire lives and die with it, or they can get sick and die from it. So
Right.
that's a whole conversation. Look,
Yeah,
Nick is excellent.
Nick is so good.
I know.
Um,
It's like magic. I know you guys think I'm doing that. That is Nick. That's Nick magic happening right there.
and Nick is so we'll do a little plug for Nick while we're at it. Nick has the Exotic Animal Foundation, and he's doing fantastic. There we go. He's doing. See how good he is.
He's got
He's so
everything.
he's doing amazing work for organizations with presentations and the digital world, which people say to me, so do you know how to do that? I go, no, I have Nick. You
That's
know,
why would I want to know that?
but, um, so when you talk about coronavirus, I know a lot of people that have flocks that are all PDD positive, and they live that way and they maintain them and they don't expose them to other birds, and it's just a way of life.
Right,
So when you said it's similar to HIV, it truly is that, back in the day it was, oh, that's it, you're done, you should euthanize this
right,
bird. And
right,
it's not like that anymore.
right,
So the you also mentioned an uptick in beak and feather.
right.
This is craziness. It's
It is.
uh,
It is.
and then, birds in the wild with beak and feather. I mean, I personally saw a bird in Australia that very
Yeah.
clearly was a beak and it was a cockatoo. It was very clearly a beak and feather bird, and it was just doing its thing, and so what are we going to do about that? How can people protect themselves and their flocks?
Boy, so that's a tougher one. We with the way that we managed the U.S. bird population, we did not have a lot of beak and feather when we got into kind of the 2000s. It's been kind of quiet. With importation that stopped, we didn't bring a lot in either, right? So once it stopped, it's always what we could raise here is what we had. And we've had recently a kind of a seeding of beak and feather through a couple of collections of birds that seeded kind of across the country. So we're not seeing all birds, but we're seeing way more than we used to, which is kind of sad, right? It's a circovirus, and it's an immune suppressive disease. And so these birds will come in, they can look normal until their first molt, and then
Mhm.
their new feathers don't come in, and their beak will necrose, and it's not a good disease, and the organism is very, very stable in the environment, and that's what makes it so hard, right?
Mhm.
It's tough to clear out. That's part of the challenge, right? If it died easy, which really rotavirus seems to, or yeah, even rotavirus is not that stable, but beak and
Mhm.
feather is super stable. It makes it
Yeah.
hard. Yeah,
I
so
mean,
testing for the susceptible species,
yeah,
and
and
that's
I
a little
mean,
bit of a yeah. Go ahead.
Branson Ritchie said, back in the day, he's like, I would never have a companion parrot because I could bring it home on my eyelashes. And
Right.
people say, oh, you're just being inflammatory. No, it's really that communicable.
So Branson Ritchie wrote a book on virology. He's a virologist, and inside
Mhm.
that book, he has a little speck of dust in it, and he has an scanning electron microscopy picture with a million viron particles on it, on this little speck of dust. And I always think of that when I have a bird that I'm worried about. That I think a speck of dust has a million particles. How do I get
Yeah,
rid of that? It's tough,
yeah.
and we're seeing it in some of the species that are not typically susceptible now. So we're seeing some of our South American species are coming up beak and feather positive. Not quite as bad as our Australasian ones, but
Right.
that's sad. I don't want to see that either.
No, and I think, people just need to they need to take the steps to not expose their birds to other birds, to not,
Right.
to use good biosecurity, and I've had people say to me, oh, well, I'm just a companion bird owner, which I don't, you know, I hate that phrase, because you're not just a companion bird owner,
Right.
you're an agriculturist, and
Absolutely.
you're a bird keeper, and
Right.
I don't have to worry about biosecurity. Well,
Yeah.
you do, you do, and I think
Yeah.
that's very.
They walk in to pick up supplies, right, and they bring something home. You gotta be thinking. It's not horrific out there, but you still have to be careful. So same reason I put my seatbelt on, right? I'm going to be careful. I'll be smart.
Right. It's not your driving.
Yes, exactly. It's everyone else. Exactly. Same with pet stores, and there's some great
Yeah.
ones, but it's exposure opportunities.
And even, people say, "Oh, I had, I had a play date." I hear that all the time. I brought my birds over to hang out with my friends' birds, or we went to lunch and we brought the birds with us at this
Right.
outdoor cafe. Well, that's excellent, and I love socialization. I think it's really
Right.
important, but be aware of who, know your friends, kind of thing. It
Exactly.
sounds
I was thinking that too.
it,
Yeah. Yeah.
it
Pick your
sounds
friends wisely. No.
yeah, and the other thing I find is that being transparent is so important. There's a rescue up in West Fargo, South Dakota, North Dakota, and oh, you're legendary. That's impressive.
Oh, who knew that one? A legend in his own mind. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's better than being infamous.
Yes,
But so
exactly.
the rescue had a case of beak and feather, and they've been working for 2 years to eradicate it from the facility.
Oh my
Yeah, and
gosh. It's a
it's
nightmare.
just yeah, and volunteers that were there went to other places, and it's this big snowball. And Candy, who is the director of that rescue, has been fantastically transparent.
Nice.
She's walked everybody through the whole thing. And, she was, when we stopped on the Rockstar Rescue Tour to see her. And it was, we were like, well, we can't really come to your place. So we did an interview on, the tailgate of the U-Haul, with
Nice.
so many feet in between. But and she's like, I think we're all set. And then she found out that it was on one radiator, one little um, forced hot air radiator.
Right.
And
Right.
she said, I can't, I can't say, oh, well, it's just that, because, it's that
Yeah.
important. So,
Right. Ugh.
uh,
It's
uh,
it's distressing.
yeah, yeah. So Douglas also made the comment that many species are disappearing in Canada because they're not doing testing, and
I yeah, I
that's
believe that.
sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and that's the other thing too, is when a lot of birds are rehomed. Jamie Whitaker and I just did a talk about, or I had her on the live stream, and we talked about defining a forever home. And so birds do get rehomed, but people have to take these precautions when you're
Right.
introducing a bird to your flock. Um, so we also had the question, what was your most unique or interesting case that you've experienced in practice?
Wow. So so I've had a bunch of really fun ones. I'll start with a funny one. How's that sound? And then we'll work on unique.
Okay.
So this is a number of years ago. I had an African gray. African gray comes in with coughing. I'm like, okay, coughing, right? We always have a drop down menu in our heads. What would cause coughing? And so I talked to the owner, tried to get them to describe the cough. Went through nutrition. What's their air conditioning? What's their air quality? All this stuff. Still couldn't come up with. There's just nothing really directing me. So I said, okay, well let's get some blood. We'll do some X-rays. We'll do a choanal swab, and maybe we'll do. I forget if we did a nasal flush, but I did a kind of a whole medical workup. I had them wait in the room because I can get results back fairly quickly. Waited in the room.
Mhm.
I had all this data with me on this African gray. I'm like, okay, I don't really see anything, but let me go talk to him. Right before I hit the door, I hear this African gray cough. Well, it's an emphysematous cough of a person. And so he's coughing. I walk in there and I said to the owner, I said, is this the cough you're talking about? Yeah, yeah, that's it. I said, does your husband have emphysema? Yeah. Does it sound like this? This doesn't sound like allergies. She said, yeah. I said, I said, your bird is normal. All the blood work was normal. The X-ray was normal, but his coughing, it was a mimicking bird, right? And
Mhm.
so it had mimicked the cough. But I had already done I talked to him, I'd gone through all this stuff, and I'm starting to, you start to get worried. You don't have an answer. It's like, well, what else
Mhm.
can I do? And yeah, sure enough, mimicking. Very cool cough. Complete with the clearing of the throat at the end, right? And then
Mhm.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, really? That's
I
that's
worked
what
with a
that's what it's going to
cockatoo
be?
like that came
Yeah.
from a a home where an individual had emphysema, and yeah.
Nice. They'll do that. Interesting cases. I'm currently working on still one I have a large macaw that has it has actually a fungal infection between the keratin layer of the beak and the bone. And that's pretty uncommon. So it had an injury previously, and that's where I think the introduction was. But it ends up with aspergillus, and it's flaking off the keratin portion of its beak. Super interesting. It's responding well to medication, but the medications have to be given for months. So the advantage to being the way to be a successful veterinarian is have owners that can comply, because trying to give it's a hyacinth medication twice a day for months, not an easy task. But
Yeah.
a super interesting case. There's bony changes on the beak on the radiographs, so it's probably the only one that really has that same look that I've seen. We see a lot of unusual stuff. Some toucanets that come in that are nice. At our first penguin a couple of weeks ago, my associate took that one on. But we have some fun stuff. There's a lot of fun stuff. We do barium series on birds. So we do. There's a lot of cool diagnostics and a lot of things you can look at. So I don't know if that answers the question, but those are fun ones.
Those are fun ones. So what have you seen? What's the most progress in avian veterinary medicine that you've seen?
So that's probably PCR testing, right? So I started veterinary medicine when there's no real PCR testing. And so we were having to do, like for avian virus, which we've known about for maybe 9 years now, we were doing crop biopsies, right? So we would put them under anesthesia, take a piece of the crop and send it out to the lab to try to get a diagnosis. For psittacosis, we were doing a test that was not near as sensitive as a PCR. It took forever, and a negative didn't mean it was negative, just means it didn't grow. So testing has taken us leaps and bounds ahead on our medical front. I think what's coming up is that I think CTs are going to be standard of care. It's not here now; it's too expensive. But I think because ultrasound didn't used to be standard of care, X-ray has not always been, but it kind of always is. And ultrasounds, they're getting closer to standard of care. CTs in the next 10 years, I think every clinic will have a CT. That's my guess.
So, all right. So this slide here, talking about sedation. What's your thoughts on that?
So I will almost always sedate for X-rays. The caveat is they have to be able to tolerate sedation. So I don't sedate for blood work. I don't sedate for exams. I don't really sedate for if I put a microchip or those kind of things, injections in. But when I do X-rays, I will sedate those guys, and I'm not putting them under anesthesia. I'm sedating, and the reason is that you can, especially we're seeing more osteoporosis, so we're seeing weaker bones. If you don't sedate these guys, they can break things, right? Where you're trying to get films, and I'm not interested in doing that. I would much rather fix things.
Yeah. So Douglas asks here, what about ELISA training? Isn't that better?
So the ELISA testing is actually, it's a different technique. It's a little harder to do. I think that the PCR is probably still a better option because they're doing little segments of the DNA. So the ELISA has kind of fallen out of favor to PCRs. Are there still people doing ELISAs for other diseases? Not in avian medicine. I'm trying to think if I do any. We used to do ELISA for psittacosis a long time ago. We do it for chlamydia, or we do it for, there was a elementary body EB testing. We do it for that, but not, there's nothing in birds I'm currently doing that on.
Okay. Yeah, he said they do the 6 major diseases, and then 3 months later they do the same test.
So which is good. I like PCRs. You're not PCRs, but so you're doing all the ELISAs and all 6 of those. So testing is going to be what makes it the keys for testing is pick your sampling technique, pick the lab that you carries the dimers that you need for the organism that you're looking for, and then you can look at their repeatability. So every lab's a little bit different, and there are some labs that if you just take, say you're taking swabs, for example, you're going to get, if I swab a bird for beak and feather, I'm going to get anything that's in that environment testing off that bird for a swab, for example. If you do blood, you take it off a toenail, you're going to get contamination. If you get off the
Mhm.
foot, you can get contamination because there's contamination on the inside of the foot. So ideally, clean stick, which for me is jugular vein for cytosines, and then
Mhm.
be sure you know your lab. Make sure you know the dimers they're using, especially for polyoma. Um, you have to kind of do that. You have to talk with your veterinarian and say, okay, and you can still pull the test if you're comfortable doing it. Just talk to your veterinarian and say, what do you have? Who do you trust? Who are you unsure about, and why?
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's a great
And
conversation to have.
I think that is an important conversation to have. And I think, you know, just because a lab puts itself out there, it may not be the right fit for you. It may not
Right.
be, everybody has, oh, I use this one, I use that one, I like,
Sure.
but when you're having that conversation, you need to ask why. What is it about this, XYZ lab that makes it one that you trust?
Right.
Is it just they have the best marketing program? Yeah,
Or
it
the best
sounds
prices. Right.
exact. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fair. Yeah.
So
So
when you're having
so
that
six
conversation,
things you're testing for, you may be testing for things that that bird won't get. So you have to kind of, I do tailor the tests I run on the species I'm looking at,
hmm
and then what's out there, right? What are we seeing? And then
right?
are the tests that are out there, like there are some tests that I run that I know a negative is good and a positive is questionable,
Yeah.
right? And like aspergillus a lot of times is that way. There's a series of things that is hard to prove, but I take that with the CBC and a physical exam and X-rays. Now, okay, the preponderance of evidence is X, Y, or Z,
hmm
and you go with the
Right.
preponderance of the evidence on some things. There's not always a black and white.
Yeah. And different things present differently. You've got, okay, like you said, you've got that drop down menu, and it's okay. We'll try this, or this, but then there are this, or this all look the same except for this bit of minutia. You
Right.
know, so
Or this
so
species will show up this way with this disease, and this species shows up this way with the exact
right.
same disease. That's kind of
Mhm.
unfair, but it's but it's the way it works. it's,
It's testing, you guys. It's actually been created by AAV. It's just another level
yes,
of
it is.
testing.
Yeah, we had a
So we've
disseminated xanthoma granulomatosis. We had one of those this year.
got, oh,
It's not well known. So the question is, if you guys can see on your screens, familiar with disseminated xanthoma granulomatous disease. It's typically, we see it in eclectus. Yep, eclectus is what I saw it in as well. I don't know that. So it's really uncommon. There's been one or maybe two reported cases. One of them was
mhm,
presented maybe a couple of years back at ABVP, but it looks like cancer. So you said your veterinarian said it was cancer, viewing the X-rays and the CT. Now the vet said no. Yeah. So those are tough because you end up having to biopsy them. It's a abnormal cholesterol metabolism that occurs. The disseminated occurs in eclectus, and the whole coelom is a disaster, the abdominal cavity. But yeah, I've seen one, and it looks like cancer on ultrasound. It looks like cancer because it looks like cancer. It's a disease that looks like cancer, and it's not. It's kind of interesting. The treatment was, at least the report I saw, was steroids are what they treated. Mine was lost to follow up. So I don't know what they ended up doing. They did not come back to see me. But that's a
so
biopsy. You got to go in there and biopsy it.
it does it present, the so when people are seeing certain things, is that something to ask about, especially
No,
with
this
eclectic?
disease. Yeah, this
Yeah.
disease. Yeah, you can always ask about it, but that
Mhm.
is because what happens is we always look for horses first. I have beating of hoofs. I look for horses, right? And then pretty soon, when all the horses have been, then you start looking for zebras, and that condition is a zebra with a horn on the end of it, right? So that's
Yeah.
super uncommon, and it presents. It'll probably be in some other species at some point because we see xanthomas in other species. But in
Mhm.
eclectus, it presents with abdominal swelling, and it's got when you ultrasound it, it looks like tumor on ultrasound, because ultrasound is not a histopathologic diagnosis, it's an anatomical imaging diagnosis or modality.
Okay.
But yeah, that's a
So,
yeah. If you've seen one of those, if you
Douglas,
had one of those, you're a unicorn.
Douglas asks if the problem with eclectus could be caused by diet.
So for xanthomas, we don't actually know what causes it. It's a cholesterol, an abnormal cholesterol reaction in birds. We see it a lot of times on extremities. We'll see it on sometimes on the outside of the abdomen. In eclectus, it's on there. It's inside the abdomen, which is why it's so bizarre. It's inside the abdominal cavity. And could it be diet? You know, everything can be diet. I hate to say that. It sounds condescending, but literally, when I first got out of school, everything was diet related. And then one of the biggest improvements over time is that we're much smarter with nutrition than we used to be. Much smarter, right? Is it perfect? Not a chance. Do we have it perfect? It's not a chance, but we have it much better. Is there an age that's associated with eclectus? You know, I think my number total is 3. And the one we saw was, I want to say it was 6 or 7, but I'm guessing. I think the one that was that was presented through ABVP was probably early teens. You know, 13, it might have been 12, which is not quite a teen, but I don't remember them being old. But to be honest, I don't know that I recall that perfectly well. I don't remember them being 30, right? Because they tolerated a lot of treatment.
So another, thing that comes up, but it gets overlooked a lot is diabetes in macaws. Do you see that?
So I have seen one macaw. I see a lot of it, transitional diabetes in cockatiels, right? We see a bunch of that because when they go through gestational changes, they end up being diabetic for a short period of time until we get the reproductive system kind of shut down. So there's been a couple reported cases of it in macaws. I don't know that I've seen one in the last couple of decades. They're out there. And then the question is, so the recommendation for diabetes in our citizens is stop reproductive activity, work on their diet, because it's hard to modulate them with insulin.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yours, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this comment on the xanthomas, mass was in the abdomen, which is what we see, had a limp, which is not uncommon, and in about 20, middle age-ish. Yep. I'm sorry, those are super frustrating, and if someone doesn't pick up that disease, it's not because they aren't good, it's because it's a bear. And prednisone is the treatment was the treatment that was reported at ABVP, which is the specialty group. Okay. So that's what they used, and they had resolution. So that was good. That was a good response.
I think that brings up a really good point, that, there are these kind of diseases, these kind of things that you see that you don't see super often. And it's not, you can only know so much.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why, so for what I like about really the avian veterinary community is that we communicate a lot with each other, because we can't know everything. I have 3 other associates, and we are always bouncing cases off each other, always, right? I'm the only one that's boarded, but they're super talented. So you can be super talented and not boarded, but it's hard to be boarded if you haven't reached a certain amount of information that you've been tested on, right? Okay. But there are some things still in avian medicine that it's been seen but never been reported. So now you're out on a limb. You have no idea. So the first time it was diagnosed, right, they biopsied it and sent it out, and they said, well, it's xanthoma. Well, that's how they got the diagnosis, because no one else had reported it. So it was a last ditch effort. We're going to take a piece of this and send it out, and poof, xanthoma. And now, I've seen one, you had one. Once it's out there, we start to recognize it. It's like, oh, okay.
Right.
But it's bizarre. Yeah. It's a truly unusual condition.
And it's a process too. I mean, it sounds horrible because when it's your bird, you don't want your bird to be the learning curve,
Exactly.
And I think we as owners and aviculturists need to realize that there is that learning curve, and there are things that are coming up that we haven't seen before. That
Right.
or there's a rescue in Michigan that saw adenovirus.
Oh,
They took in a hoarding case,
right.
and she's like, the birds were, bleeding, and I just thought they were, free flighted in the house. The owner had passed,
Right.
and it was, they didn't know what it was. She luckily brought them back to the facility and quarantined them, and they all had to be euthanized.
Oof.
And this is
Yeah.
something that, hasn't been seen for years
I
in
know.
the
The last one I
companion.
saw was probably 15 or 20 years ago. Last one I saw.
Yeah,
So that's a long
yeah.
time ago. And some of it comes back. It's like right now we're seeing beak and feather in a
Mhm.
macaw. That's not supposed to happen, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Do we see many cases of tuberculosis? So the question is, do we see many cases of tuberculosis in the U.S.? What I see is mycobacteria, not tuberculosis, but mycobacteria, either genovens or intracellularis or avian. It's the same mycobacteria, which is in people it's Mycobacteria tuberculosis. In birds, it's Mycobacteria something different. And we do
Mhm.
see, I don't know if we see a lot of them. In Amazons, there's kind of a classic third eyelid. You'll see a granuloma in those, and those can be Mycobacteria. We see it if we ever see green cheeks. We don't see those very much anymore. They would have Mycobacteria, but it's out there. It's probably, I might see a tuberculosis case every couple of years, maybe every 12
Mhm.
months. So it's out there, but not super
Yeah.
common. And actually, some of the new testing, the DNA testing, genetic testing on microbes is great for picking up mycobacteria because it doesn't have to grow it. It
Right.
checks the genetics on it, which is really cool. That's another up and coming diagnostic modality.
Mhm. Joyce said that her last two vets are amazing with doing everything they could. Yeah, Dr. Hofer does.
Yes, they are. Those two are amazing. That is so. I
Um,
concur. I concur with your estimation of their skills. They are both
yeah,
amazing, and they're super nice. So the veterinary community, the avian veterinary community, is pretty small. So we all kind of know each
yeah.
other.
And then Michelle asked about suspected diabetes in cockatoos. Would that be treated the same as it is in teals?
So if I have a truly a diabetic case, so we have a glucose that's 1700, right? So a glucose of 400 or 500 in a cockatoo, I'm not going to call that diabetes. It's going to have to be 800 to 1200. It's going to be high, and they're going to have to be drinking a lot and urinating a lot. So I have to have a collection of evidence to actually to say it's diabetes. Because in dogs and cats, 400, you're diabetic. People, same thing.
Yeah.
Birds, they're going to be 800 to 1200 before I call them diabetic. And I'm going to work them up. I'm going to look for a reproductive disease, a reproductive activity. The pancreas is what produces the insulin. So I'm going to look at how the pancreas looks either on ultrasound or imaging, make sure there's nothing else on my x-rays. So it's not a clean diagnosis. And subsequently, it's not necessarily a clean treatment plan until you know all the facts. But it is almost always shutting. It's usually more common in females than males. And it usually is trying to shut down reproductive activity and then making sure diet is adequate and then look for other concurrent diseases. Because sometimes you manage the concurrent diseases and your diabetes is gone, which is what happens in cockatiels all the time. They're like, I'm diabetic. Oh, no, I'm not. It's like, okay. I like when they do that. No, I'm not. Change my
Yeah.
mind.
Um,
There you go.
at least be vague.
Yes,
I hate to
exactly.
do this, but we're at an hour. This has been amazing. I so appreciate your candid approach, and your willingness to take questions and answer questions. And if we can make it happen, I would love to have you on again if you're
Yeah.
willing to do that.
Yeah. Super fun.
Um, but thank you. And so everybody is
Yeah.
now moving to Texas. So you'll be
Yes.
getting an influx of new patients.
Yeah. Perfect. And there's our snow. It happens every decade, whether we want it to or not.
Right. Yeah. Don't try to, put people off with that snow. Yeah. Although to Parrot Festival last year in the snow in Alabama. So I didn't drive. Carrie Ellen was driving, but
Nice.
yeah. So I will see you. I'll see you in person in January, and maybe we
Yes.
can, something together
You bet.
before that. So
It's easier for you to
hopefully.
say.
Really did. All right. Well, have a wonderful week, everybody. And I will not be doing a live stream next week or the week after. I have to cook. And everybody have a wonderful Thanksgiving if you
Yep.
celebrate, and take care.
You too. Take care. Thanks, everybody. I'm glad you were here. Have a good
Bye
one.
bye.
Bye bye.